morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Korea-India Strategic Dialogue Symposium, co-hosted by the Institute for Future Strategy at Seoul National University and the Embassy of India to the Republic of Korea. My name is Min Hae-zo, and I'm a senior researcher at the Institute for Future Strategy, and it is a privilege to act as the conference moderator today. Today's symposium brings together leading experts from academia, think tanks, and industry to discuss how Korea and India, two dynamic democracies and innovation partners, can strengthen cooperation across defense, technology, and economic resilience amid profound global change. We are privileged to have with us esteemed speakers and participants from both countries. Let me briefly outline today's program. We will begin with welcoming remarks by the Director of the Institute for Future Strategy, followed by keynote addresses from the Ambassador of India to the Republic of Korea, the Deputy Minister for Economic Affairs of the Republic of Korea, and the Executive Vice President of Seoul National University. Afterward, we will proceed to three core sessions: defense cooperation, AI for inclusive growth, and supply chain resilience. Then we will close with a general discussion and vote of thanks. And now, please help me welcome the Director of the Institute for Future Strategy at Seoul National University, Professor Won-Pik Kang, who will deliver the welcoming remarks.
안녕하세요. 서울대학교 국가미래전략원 원장 가운태입니다. 일단 한국어로 짧게 말씀드리고 준비한 영어 인사말 전해드리겠습니다. 특별한 기회에 인도와 같이 이런 중요한 타이밍에 할 수 있게 됐을 때 기쁘게 생각을 하고, 앞으로도 이번 행사를 계기로 많이 양국 간의 그런 협력과 공동 연구, 공동 작업이 많이 이루어졌으면 좋겠다, 이런 말씀 드리고 싶습니다. 오늘 특별히 와주신 우리 대사님이나 김일성 대사님 감사드립니다. 준비해 왔기 때문에 영어로 몇 마디 하겠습니다. Good morning. As the Director of the Institute for Future Strategy at Seoul National University, it is my great honor to welcome you to the Korea-India Strategic Dialogue Symposium, co-hosted together with the Embassy of India. We gather today at a pivotal moment in the global order. The Indo-Pacific has become the strategic center of geopolitical and economic dynamics as shifting US-China relations and evolving regional alignments reshape security, technology cooperation, and the supply chain networks. In this context, the partnership between Korea and India is not only increasingly important, it holds tremendous potential for shaping a stable, open, and prosperous regional future. Today's dialogue, therefore, is more than an academic discussion. It is a forward-looking platform that brings together policymakers, diplomats, scholars, and industry leaders to explore shared interests and develop cooperative strategies for addressing emerging challenges. At the Institute for Future Strategy, our mission is to anticipate global transformations and to convene the best minds from government, academia, and the private sector to think strategically about the future. We see today's symposium as a meaningful step toward strengthening collective foresight and deepening practical cooperation between our two nations. I sincerely hope that today's exchanges will lay the foundation for a long-term partnership, one that not only enhances mutual understanding, but also leads to collaborative initiatives in research, innovation, leadership development, and strategic policy coordination in the years ahead. It is also my wish that this symposium will broaden the scope of dialogue across multiple domains, fostering continued engagement and building the groundwork for a forward-looking and mutually rewarding relationship between our two nations. I would like to express my deepest appreciation to His Excellency, the Ambassador of India, and his team, as well as to our distinguished speakers and participants for your commitment and invaluable contributions to this dialogue. Finally, and certainly not least, I would like to offer my special thanks to Dr. Jomine of our institute for her dedication and hard work in organizing and preparing this event. 박수 한번 주시죠. Once again, welcome to Seoul National University. May today's discussion inspire enduring cooperation and contribute to peace and shared prosperity across the Indo-Pacific and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Director, for your very kind words. We will now hear the keynote addresses. First, please help me welcome His Excellency, Ambassador Gauranga Lal Das of India to the Republic of Korea.
Director, the Vice President, the Deputy Minister, distinguished audience, the scholars, participants at this dialogue. A very good morning to all of you. I am particularly delighted to be here this morning to join our partners, the Institute for Future Strategy at the Seoul National University, to kick off the inaugural round of the India-Korea Strategic Symposium. I think it's a very significant, symbolic beginning that we are making today. Because if we look around the world today, we see convergence of many different things coming together. The geopolitics has always been there with us. Geoeconomics, and increasingly geotechnology. The new things, new trends that we see are all a convergence of the old and the new coming together. New types of technologies emerging, the challenges of dealing with those technologies, the challenges of dealing with leverage of economics for political ends. And this has come to a stage where I don't think it's going to go away very soon. So when we look at the future, I think we have to anticipate that we are transitioning into something altogether different. So unless we put our thoughts together, unless we collate all the collective wisdom around this room, we will not do justice to the future generations. And I think that is the purpose why we are meeting today. If we talk of the future, of course, for us, the relations between Korea and India, the future of this relationship looks very bright and promising. At this point in time, I can tell you that with the current government of Korea coming into office not long ago, we have had an excellent run for several months now with high-level visits, high-level meetings, summit-level interactions, dialogues at the functional level, and increasing realization that our futures are intertwined. We inhabit the same geography of Indo-Pacific. We are like-minded in terms of our values, our political beliefs and systems. We don't have any fundamental conflict between us. I think if we look at this relationship, we can only see potential, but regretfully not enough tapping of those potential. So it is high time that India and Korea, as the world's among the top 10 economies in the world and with strong growth rates in both countries, I think we are going to play an increasingly important role in a world which is trending towards multipolarity with different alignments based on issues coming up. So in that, we see a lot of opportunities, a lot of value for our relations with Korea. And I dare say that in my few weeks here in this town, I see similar sentiments expressed whether I meet the industry, whether I meet the academia, whether I meet the government. So I think it's a good time for us to actually share our perspectives on some of the emerging issues, the issues for the future, the issues on the horizon, where we can benefit from each other's understanding, expertise, and assessment and prognosis. So we are happy to bring here to you, to our friends in Korea, some of our leading scholars and experts on the subjects that have been identified for today's discussion. And I'm happy to see that the Seoul National University, which is the #1 university in Korea, has also brought together a galaxy of distinguished experts who can also give their perspective. So I think the topics are all very important. We are excited that we have this opportunity for sharing ideas in a very in-depth manner. So I look forward to hearing the recommendations that you come up with. We, as government, as embassy, we really value your inputs, because I think as we try to craft a new vision for India-Korea relations, inputs from the experts, inputs from the academia will be highly relevant in shaping the future course of this very significant relationship. So with those few words, let me once again thank our co-host, the Institute for Future Strategy, for kindly organizing this event and being an excellent partner with all your flexibility, for all your hospitality. And also I thank all the visitors from India who, despite a very short notice, managed to come here with their strong expertise. I am sure we will all benefit from this. So wish all the participants a very successful and memorable, productive experience today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Before our next keynote address, we kindly invite our keynote addressees, speakers, and moderators to come forward for an official photograph to commemorate today's symposium. If I can invite you to the front, please. And now, please help me welcome Deputy Minister Hee-sang Kim from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Professor Kang Won-taek, Director of Institute for Future Strategy, Professor Kim Jung-gi, Executive Vice President of Seoul National University, distinguished participants from Observer Research Foundation, ORF, and other institutions, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I'd like to begin by offering my sincere condolences to the people of India who lost their loved ones by the explosion in Delhi, and I wish the injured a swift and full recovery. And also I'd like to thank the Embassy of India and Seoul National University and ORF for organizing this meaningful symposium. I believe this event will continue to serve as an important bridge connecting the academic communities of our two countries, Korea and India. India is very special to me. During 2006-09, I served at the Korean Embassy in New Delhi, and just after coming back, I participate in the negotiations for Korea-India CEPA, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. So these experiences helped me realize the importance and potential for our economic partnership. And when I visited New Delhi this year, the April this year, I was deeply impressed to see that this potential is now realized under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. This year marks the 10th anniversary of our special strategic partnership. And over the past decade, we have worked very hard to enhance our cooperation in many areas. And as a government official who is in charge of economic affairs, economic diplomacy, I'd like to share some recent development and future directions focusing on the economic field. Currently, around 670 Korean companies are operating in India, creating jobs and contributing to local economies. This year, we celebrated several milestones. One notable example is the IPO of LG Electronics India in October. I hope that Korean companies' activities in India will continue to expand, and I kindly ask for India's continued support and cooperation in deepening our bilateral economic ties. Our two countries are also enhancing cooperation in defense and defense industries. The contract for the second phase of Bajira procurement project concluded in April reflects the growing closeness of our defense partnership. We also see strong potential for collaboration in maritime security and shipbuilding. Beyond these areas, we are well positioned to work together in supply chains, investment, and emerging technologies, all of which are essential for sustainable growth and future-oriented partnership. As Ambassador mentioned already, today's international environment is becoming more unpredictable. Intensifying strategic competition and rising protectionism are affecting economies around the world. In such challenging times, it is crucial that Korea and India work together to navigate these changes and find new opportunities. Finally, I'd like to mention that the new Korean government remains committed to continuing and further developing the new Southern policy as our key national policy task. India is a vital partner in Korea's efforts to expand our diplomatic horizon and strengthen cooperation with the Global South. Thank you once again for inviting me. And the April this year, I had the opportunity to attend the seminar organized by the ORF in Delhi. And it is a great honor to join another symposium organized by the ORF together with Seoul National University. So I hope today's discussion will offer candid reflection on the past 10 years of our strategic partnership and also provide fresh insights and directions for our next decade. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. And now, please help me welcome the Executive Vice President of Seoul National University and the former Director of the Institute for Future Strategy, Professor Joon-gi Kim.
This was, 18 months in making. Finally, we were so looking forward to meeting you colleagues from India, and finally this is happening. Distinguished guests, colleagues and friends, it's a great honor to welcome you to this joint strategic dialogue between ORF and SNU's Institute for Future Strategy. I'm really delighted that leading thinkers from India and Korea have gathered here at a moment when our two countries face both profound risks and unprecedented opportunities. You know, I think Korea and India share many similar strengths and features. Our resilient democracy, also vibrant economy. The ambassador mentioned we both are enjoying strong growth. You are enjoying strong growth. We are not. We are pretty much stagnant, but we look forward to having the economy kick back again. Our human capital, very much vital, and also technological sector, very, very strong. So, I mean, there are many similarities that we can both work together, and at a time when there are so many uncertainties and so on. But today, our relationship extends beyond economics. We meet at a time when the global order is being reshaped by, as you know, geopolitical competition, emerging technologies, and energy transition, to list a few. So I think this dialogue is really important, not just the exercise of an academic exchange, but also an opportunity to align our strategic vision to explore complementary strengths and to design new forms of partnership suited to the complexity of the 21st century. I want to thank our colleagues from ORF. You made a trip, long trip from India, and I look forward to your contribution to the global strategic thinking. Also, I'd like to thank Director mentioned it already, Dr. Chomine, and also Director Kang Won-taek for making this possible. And I look forward to hearing your views and exchanging different ideas and so on. And thank you again.
We are now ready to begin with our first session. Our first session will be how Korea and India can strengthen defense ecosystems amid rising geopolitical tensions and rapid technological change. Please help me welcome our first speaker, Professor Harsh Pant, the Vice President of the Observer Research Foundation. Professor?
Thank you very much, and let me start by thanking SNU on behalf of ORF. That, as was mentioned earlier, the plan started, thanks to the Indian Embassy here long back, and ORF had a certain role to play, and we hope that we can continue this engagement between SNU, ORF, or between the thinkers, policymakers of India and Korea in different capacities, both in India and in Korea. And we hope that we can invite you for our flagship conference, RICINA, next year, and do track 1.5 as India-Korea dialogue, and we'll discuss that separately. But I think what perhaps a lot of the speakers earlier have already alluded to is this is a moment that is ripe for thinking more ambitiously about this relationship. It has always been a relationship that had been dominated by economic and trade trends, but it had also strategically punched much below its weight. And I think, given the realities of geopolitics, geoeconomics, and as the ambassador said, technology, geotechnology, it's finding out areas where India and Korea can work together, particularly at this point in time, is perhaps a strategic necessity now for both countries, and therefore. How do we think about defense relationship? We will talk about supply chains and AI and other emerging tech later. But since this session is largely on defense, I think it is fair to point out that defense cooperation is a function of the strategic context in which nations find themselves. And perhaps for the first time, in India and Korea find themselves facing certain similarities in their strategic environments, and which means that for two emerging economic powers, two middle powers in the Indo-Pacific, this is a moment to understand the underlying trends and to weave out a relationship on defense and security that perhaps one could not thought of in an earlier era. And I think if you think about the strategic, the structural imperative for India and Korea, I think one, the reality of changing balance of power in the region and beyond is a reality. And that balance of power issues we have been discussing for a while, that China's rise is changing so much around us. But what has also happened in recent past, and I think there are two aspects to it. One is the American politics and how it has evolved and how it is shaping America's strategic posture in this part of the world. And this is going to cast a long shadow over America's partners, America's allies, and I think that this therefore a need to rethink the conventional approach to partnerships, to alliances, to treaties, treaty alliances, and to strategic relationships. Similarly, I think the question of which I think had been discussed for a while is that if China is rising, what does it mean for regional turbulence? What does it mean for countries that have traditionally associated China with economic interdependence? And I think that argument, which used to be very strong, that economic interdependence or economic globalization or is somehow going to be an antithesis to conflict, is somehow going to prevent security competition from reaching a certain threshold of conflict. That argument has, to a certain extent, has been invalidated. And therefore, when we see weaponization of supply chains, when we see weaponization of trade relationships from all sides, this is also a realization that over-dependence on any one country, whether it is economic or whether it is strategic, is bad. And I think in their own ways, India and Korea are also learning that lesson, that if you put your eggs in one basket, it creates certain kinds of vulnerabilities that were at one point in time seen as perhaps an antidote to conflict, which is now becoming a vulnerability. And I think India has been making that case for a while, and I think Korea has also started confronting that similar situation. So if you then think of this issue of geopolitics and how that is shaping India and Korea's behavior, it seems that as two middle powers, the security landscape that they confront makes it imperative that they come together, frame their responses around the similar strategic environment that they face, and push certain agenda items on the table that perhaps could not be conceived earlier. The other aspect, of course, is that this, which was mentioned earlier, is both India and Korea are part of what is now called the Indo-Pacific, and the growing centrality of the Indo-Pacific, the shifting center of gravity from Euro-Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific means that countries which are capable, like India and Korea, will have to be much more willing to shoulder greater responsibility. That is not simply a response to the environment, but also a response to one of our important partners, like what Mr. Trump is demanding, or Trump administration is demanding from its allies, that they do more. I think one of the most serious aspects of that which is visible, is in Europe. But if you read through the finer print, it is also very evident in the Indo-Pacific that America's alliance partners are being asked to do more for regional security, are being asked to shoulder greater burden. But I think it is also in the interest of partners and allies to do more, because it creates an incentive for America to be involved in the region. If the allies and partners are not shouldering that responsibility, or are seemingly not shouldering that responsibility, then I think the argument for the isolationists in the Trump administration becomes that much stronger. That why are we here for? Why are we fighting certain battles that we need to fight? So I think the idea of the Indo-Pacific from former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's articulation of the need to view Pacific and Indian oceans as one contiguous maritime zone, that argument is now almost validated by this idea that the challenges that our nations are facing in South China Sea, East China Sea, Taiwan Straits, Himalayan borders, etc., you really can't compartmentalize them anymore. And I think increasingly you see that debate being expressed in the way countries are framing their responses. And for both India and Korea, therefore, and this is reflected in India's Indo-Pacific vision, this is reflected in Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy and new South-Southern policy, that how do you keep this region free, open, prosperous, and inclusive in some ways, and that Indo-Pacific does not become a zone of perpetual conflict, but for powers like India and Korea, this has to be a region that somehow can insulate itself, and that can only from great power competition, and that can only happen if middle powers start defining their security relationships in manner that perhaps is the need of the time. And final point on this that I want to make is if you think of the Indo-Pacific, and if you think of how dramatically this geography has evolved in the last few decades, it is also clear that institutionalization in this geography is fairly limited. That we don't, obviously, because the geography itself is new. The architectures that are needed to support different aspects of this geography, they still are a work in progress. And therefore, there is a normative void, there is an institutional void in this geography that will have to be filled in some ways by countries that believe in a certain degree of inclusiveness, in a certain degree of fairness in the system, which I think is articulated in their respective strategies. And that means that I think the time where India could argue that, look, what happens in the Indian Ocean has nothing to do with the Pacific, or the time when Korea could argue that, look, what happens in South China Sea or in the Pacific has nothing to do with what happens in the Indian Ocean region, I think those times are gone. And unless we start conceptualizing our security in ways that perhaps is more expansive, and for a country, particularly like Korea, and for a country like India, that have had their domains, that have had their geographies very specifically sketched out, unless we start resketching those geographical domains, it would become very difficult to work together. So in some ways, it is therefore the point that I made. It is incumbent now on Korea and India and countries like-minded countries, as was mentioned earlier, middle powers, to show that they can carry the burden of managing the region. Now, I think there are, before I come to India and Korea's specific defense cooperation projects, I think the first issue that we need to address is how convergent the two nations are when it comes to their respective regional security visions. And I think that's a fundamental question that we have to start from, and where I think we have not invested enough intellectually, and forget capacity-wise, but even intellectually, we have not answered this question. Because when we say that, look, India and Korea are doing well, we are looking at it in piecemeal fashion. We are looking at it, there are certain industries that are doing well, there are certain sectors that are doing well, there are certain areas, domains where there is a need in India, where there is a supply from Korea, or vice versa. That is something that that can be worked out. But the bigger question, I think, and now that we are talking of economics, when we are looking at economics through national security lens, I think the bigger question that both sides have to answer and work on is, where do our regional security visions converge, if they converge at all? And I think there needs to be some meat put on the table, that I think this compartmentalization of our visions no longer serves our interests. And if that doesn't serve our interests, then can we frame a response to the larger environment where we can start talking about difficult issues? That what happens if there is a crisis in Taiwan Strait tomorrow? What will be Korea's response, or what will be India's response? I don't think we have started moving in that direction. Whereas if you look at the strategic debate of great powers, that is where the debate is going. You see every day new analysis coming out about how complicated Taiwan Strait is becoming, what perhaps can be the security dynamic there. There are dates being provided by various scholars. This can happen in the next 3 years, 2 years, 5 years. And I think Indians and Koreans both have not started addressing those questions as to if there is a real challenge to regional security, then what is it that India and Korea together can do, or individually can do, and therefore think through the implications of what is happening. So I think in some ways this idea, the fundamental question of how convergent we are, because because only once we have answered that question can we build the larger issue of defense cooperation. Because at this point, what is happening in defense cooperation is that it is very piecemeal. So we are talking of defense exercises, we are talking of staff exchanges, we are talking of certain kinds of products. The Vajra, K9 Vajra was mentioned, certain technologies, but they are not wrapped into a larger framework, so that it becomes every project becomes a piecemeal project, which is good, better than before, but it does not allow you to answer the fundamental questions that both nations are facing when it comes to regional security. And to be fair, one cannot be overly critical, because formal defense cooperation between India and Korea only started in 2005. And so it's not as if there is a long history here that one can talk of. I think it's a nascent exercise. And for both sides, it has been a difficult coming to terms with each other in the security and defense space. But I think given that from 2005, where we have come from defense exchanges, information exchanges, visits by military experts, joint education, to cyber security, military intelligence, and space cooperation, there is a huge arc that has been covered. But whether that can be propelled further, and I think where is this going is the question that I think we need to answer. The most specific area of cooperation that I think since the morning all speakers have mentioned is, of course, the maritime angle, and there we do see naval cooperation, for example, taking the lead. There is some element of army to army exchanges, military in the military domain, but Navy, of course, has taken the lead, and maritime domain has been at the forefront. And in that context, of course, we often talk of shipbuilding as shipbuilding cooperation that needs to be enhanced and expanded. It has strategic implications. Now, whether that can be achieved without, whether that can achieve its full potential without both India and the US once again thinking through the implications of their own domestic policies, remains a question. That there are enough domestic challenges both in India and in Korea in terms of amplifying the range of cooperation that is available. But on maritime space, certainly, much has happened, and there is space for much more. There is, I think, the engagement that two nations have is also very evident in some of the platforms that are available. You have IORA, Indian Ocean Rim Association, or Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, and both Korean Navy participates. There is also India has made a case for Korea's participation in what is called the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, which is bringing together a maritime framework on blue economy and maritime security as being two pillars for that. So there is also that the maritime space is now brewing with multiple plurilaterals or minilaterals, where there is a lot of scope for greater engagement from Korea. But there are 4 or 5 areas where I think potential still is lacking, and which I'll just point out specifically, because I think the issue of future potential is a serious one, and there defense manufacturing is certainly one where we have to have greater engagement and greater sustainability. One can see it through one can engage it through the lens of shipbuilding, but because shipbuilding is largely commercial, from a specific element of defense cooperation, this idea that South Korea can establish manufacturing bases in India to export to third markets has been something that can potentially be thought about. So, for example, Southeast Asia, Africa, and beyond, there is a huge demand, growing demand for defense equipment, and there for Korea to tailor its investment and localization strategies to Indian context is something that is very important, that is going to be important, because India is opening up its defense sector. India is now very keen to have external partners engage, private sector engage in its defense sector, and it had been a very complicated defense procurement, defense policy as far as India was concerned. That part is changing, and I think that allows for the possibility of Korea's defense manufacturing to make a play for it, and I think there is enough incentive there for both sides to engage. Then, of course, this idea of maritime security that is often talked about is the other element. Now, maritime security in some ways has reached its limit in terms of what the present arrangements allow India and Korea to do. There is enough that is happening, in terms of joint activity, exchanges, etc. But I think there is still a challenge here when it comes to enhancing certain degree of interoperability, because full interoperability will be very difficult in the short to medium term. But certain degree of interoperability where common threats which can be largely non-traditional can be tackled. There is a challenge insofar as how India and Korea relate to each other, and there are again intellectual issues on both sides. There is one issue where for Korea to think of India as a partner, as a defense partner outside its traditional partners, which have generally been the West and Western oriented partners in the Indo-Pacific. For India, this idea that strategic autonomy also requires defense partnerships, and that we see in India, this intellectual argument is changing. India seems much more open to building partnerships, arguing that it enhances India's strategic space to maneuver. And I think that shift in India is something that Korea can use to its advantage, can leverage to its advantage. Because at this point, I think if you think of other partners who have traditionally been more oriented towards the West, or who have traditionally been West oriented in the Indo-Pacific, whether it is the Australians or the Japanese, I think Korea lags behind in its defense engagement, in its maritime engagement with India. Korea did express an interest in becoming, in sort of joining a Quad at one point. There was this idea that Korea was interested, but I think that was a dead end, given that Quad is not expanding and is unlikely to expand. But I think bilateral cooperation, which Korea already has, the kind it has with, say, Australians or the Japanese, there are possibilities there that exist with India and Korea, which I think have not been exploited so far. And I think it's largely an intellectual argument to be made, both particularly in Korea, that whether this is something that can be pushed because defense engagements are changing, strategic partnerships are changing, India's relationships are also changing. So unless we think through some of those engagements here, it might be a very it might put a lid on what India and Korea can do in the maritime space as well. Related to this is how we strengthen Indian Ocean frameworks, because I think while Korea engages with India on certain Indian Ocean platforms, I don't think there is enough thinking in Korea on whether Indian Ocean is an important region to be engaged with on a sustained basis. So I think there again there is an engagement, there is a challenge there, and this I think ultimately, which will be talked about later, is that how do we integrate emerging tech into which is AI, robotics, advanced semiconductors into the defense space, is something that is another frontier given Korea's advantages in that sector and India's demand in that sector. I think there is going to be massive defense sector innovation that is already happening and that is likely to happen and that is likely to be privileged by India. So what role Korea can play, and there again we will have the first mover advantage. If Korea makes the first move, it may have that advantage, because many other countries are there which are looking at that potential, and I think that space remains to be exploited. So by and large, I think whether you think of defense manufacturing, whether you think of maritime cooperation, whether you think of emerging tech in defense, or whether you think of shipbuilding and supply chain integration, I think we have started building a relationship and with where there is a lot of potential. The challenge remains that in the absence of a wider strategic framework, in the absence of our understanding how far we converge with each other on regional security, and without a sustained dialogue on regional security and regional security architecture, there are very organic limits to that cooperation. And I think that's the broadest point that I want to make, is that unless we start thinking more seriously and intellectually about this argument, that how far do we want to go with each other? It is fair to argue that, look, we only want to go so far, given the uncertainties in the environment. But unless we make that argument, it becomes very difficult to make a broader push for a sustained relationship at a time when India has multiple partners and multiple partnerships, and Korea is facing challenges from China, from in its great power contestation. So you have the level of challenges that Korea is facing might be very similar to India's, but that does not mean that they are convergent on regional security cooperation and regional security frameworks. So my I think reflection would be, and in some ways an attempt when it comes to defense and security, that while we focus on specific domains where we can work, and there I think some thinking is going on, and more thinking is likely to come. I think more than that, we need to think and re-investigate how far we want to go and how far we want to invest in each other's capacities and capacity building. Because ultimately, that is contingent on the strategic context that we face. Ultimately, that is contingent on how convergent our interests in the region, and how confident are we that the other side will have our back when the chips are down. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor. And now, please help me welcome our next speaker, Professor Woo Il-pek from the Department of Political Science and International Studies at Yonsei University.
Hello, this is Woo Il-pek from Yonsei University Policy Department, and thank you for inviting me to this strategic dialogue. OLF and many friends before, but I think new faces to me so far. And thank you for inviting me, Director Kang and Vice Director, Deputy Director, Son. Today, I will make a little bit of a short presentation on this South Korea its approach to global strategy, as well as its implication for the South Korea and India bilateral relationship. So the given title is Forging Strategic Shield between these two countries, and that's a pretty daunting task, to be honest with you. Tyranny of the tyranny of distance already is imposed, and but still, let me try, to something useful for this bilateral relationship. My lecture room is same, so okay, this one. I think it's Professor Pantet explained very elegantly. It's a security structure, global security structure is changing, and always changing all the time. But in this time of 2020s, mid 2020s, it's just speedy, just unimaginable. Time of war, I say, and the age of peace has passed, of course, and then the age of war has returned. The Cold War and the post-Cold War and the new Cold War, and many people have labeled this 3 different times. I think we are entering the new Cold War era. And the global security structure of the post-Cold War era has unraveled, of course. And then the epitome of this argument is the ongoing Russo-Ukraine war. And then there are upcoming wars in many other places. We experience the wars in the Gaza, and Israel actually provoking, and Iran is responding. But at the same time, this East Asia, the Korean Peninsula, and then Taiwan Strait also in the great danger, for not probably imminent war, but potential wars. And then that actually has the fundamental security structure. That's the U.S.-China competition. I think it become more like a cliche. Last 10 years we discuss in the security community, not just in South Korea, but also any other countries in bilateral and expanded format. And we need to think about this U.S.-China competition. And that actually supercharging the global security structural change. And when we discuss about Ukraine-Russia war, Russia-Ukraine war, and that's more like a proxy war, many people say. Of course, President Donald Trump actually has a little bit different approach, but from the bird's view and historical view, it's pretty same. More like China versus the United States in the Ukraine-Russia or Europe and a Eurasian continent. That's how I see. Donald Trump administration 2.0 actually storming the world. And we had the APEC a couple of weeks ago in South Korea, and then many people say it's historic, summit between the President Xi and the President Trump. But we didn't see much of progress. To be honest with you, South Korea is become very proud of the successful APEC meeting, but it was not that successful for the mediating the United States and China. And then that type of bilateral competition actually includes the European partners and then Asian partners. Of course, Asia is South subcontinent, of course, in the Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia, and then European countries also, Central Eastern Europe. Of course, that's the NATO Eastern flank, and then Northern European countries as well as Western European countries actually are converging in terms of security. That's I will say more. Okay. Two security convergences. I'm writing a book on the global strategy of South Korea, but that's the theoretical framework, region and dimension. The process by which two or more entities, ideas, or phenomena become increasingly interconnected, unified, or aligned. That's the definition, and then conceptualization of convergence. There's a security convergence really happening in two. And then the dimensional convergence also, it's accelerating. It's due to the technology. The rapid advancement in cutting-edge science and technology, is symbolized and then realized by artificial intelligence and then robotics and biochemistry. That's actually put a lot of countries' economic and then technological security into military strategy also. So we are experiencing the new terminology, economic security and technology security right now. But if you think about 3, 4, 5 years ago, we didn't even have this economic security terminology in the security studies. So this is a really interesting part. And then as I just say, conventional military security and then emerging economic and technological security actually have converging into one. So we cannot now distinguish or separate these three different securities categorized by others before, but now we see this convergence. So politics, economy, technology, triple amalgamation is really happening, and that actually changing security structure of each region and then global. So I make so much. Yeah, forget about it. The regional security convergence is also is very important, and I think Professor Pant mentioned about Euro-Atlantic region and the Indo-Pacific region, and then regional security. It's already quite separated. Of course, I mentioned the tyranny of distance, and then about 7,000 miles, kilometers away from Central Eastern Europe and then Korean Peninsula. But now we are witnessing this security convergence, and not just mention about NATO IP4 format. But also, we South Korea and North Korea actually enters this security theater of NATO's eastern flank, and then that actually it shows this regional convergence between this Indo-Pacific and the Euro-Atlantic region and really happening. Of course, it starts with China 16 plus and 70 plus 1 to the Central Eastern Europe and Southern European countries. Actually, that actually initiate this security conversion between these two regions. But China is there, but China is the start point. And then South Korea entered this European security theater with the defense industry. I think it's many of you are, we are in the security community and following up the defense industrial expansion of South Korea last couple of years. And that's really shocking, to Poland and Romania and other Central and Eastern and the Nordic countries. And that's entirely changing the structure of the European security. Poland is going to be a number one ground force beyond Germany and then France. If Poland is procuring a South Korean weapon systems such as 10 K2 3.5 generation jet the tank, and then Howitzer 600, I think it's 80 something, and then MLRS, and then 286. So on and on and on, then it's going to be very, very big issue. And then South Korea is supporting Ukraine indirectly via filling up the arsenal of the Central and Eastern European country, which is providing all kinds of weapons to Ukraine. So South Korea is in this European security, and of course North Korea is the other from the opposite direction. North Korea providing not just only ammunitions and the weapons, also they are the real participants. Of the Ukraine-Russia war, and about 15,000 strong soldiers in there, and then it will be reinforced by probably another 15,000 soldiers and other military personnel. So South Korea and then North Korea actually playing a role of the vanguard or catalyst in this security convergence between Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic region. But again, I think Professor Pant and the other keynote speakers already mentioned about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is China, the United States actually is pretty hard to deal with, and then that actually put the two regions, Euro-Atlantic regions and Indo-Pacific regions, in the pretty difficult position, for the understanding and adjusting to the changing structure of security in the era of the security convergences. Very debatable. Trump is pushing more war, and then I think it's Trump is minimizing war. It can be debated in the for whole day, but Trump is playing a very, very important role, and put the United States in the very different position. I think Professor Pant mentioned about the isolationist. I think that makes sense. Make America great again. That actually puts United States under isolation, and then withdraw all kinds of troops from not just Europe, but also East Asia. The Global Posture Review will be published pretty soon, and we will see how fast it will be. But I think they're changing or withdrawing from both regions will be pretty imminent next 5 years or so. So two flashpoints in Asia, Taiwan Strait and Korean Peninsula I mentioned, and then not just the Euro-Atlantic regions in Europe, the Russo-Ukraine war, and possibly Russo-Polish war, Russo-Lithuanian Baltic war. Finns are very nervous about their security right now. It's not just then and here's Asia too. So these are the era of the war, I can say. And I think it's we can just touch upon this North Korea, Russia, China issue. I started with this security convergence in the analytic framework, and then bottom line is the United States and China is competing, and then between these two, and Ukraine and Europe, and then Russia is between them. So Ukraine and Russia actually having the military complex right now, and then that actually put other countries beside these two countries in the security dilemma. Very, very typical security dilemma, and the United States and China is beyond them and then push them, whether they are trying or not. And that's how I see. But the North Korea is playing a very important role here, and then North Korea is providing, according to my Ukraine military strategist friend, about half of the ammunitions are provided by the North Korea for Russia this year. So that's a huge number of ammunition. So basically, what they say is, if North Korea stop providing ammunitions, and then Russia cannot sustain its aggressive force attack on this Ukraine. So this is how critical North Korea get involved in the Ukraine-Russia war. That's why I'm saying this security convergence is really happening, catalyzed by these two Koreas. But the thing is, China has been very ambivalent about this, China, Russo, North Korea rapprochement, or the strategic military alliance. And then, but as we witnessed about a month ago in Tiananmen Square, in President Xi and the President Putin, and then the President, leader Kim. Chairman Kim together and then shows that they have a trilateral solidarity. Of course, they didn't have a bilateral meeting or trilateral meeting outside of that ceremony, but still we can see that they are ganging up. So the China actually has been reluctant to admit this North Korea as nuclear power. And the nuclear power of North Korea might be recognized by China, not just Russia pretty soon. That actually changed the entire security structure of Northeast Asia. So and then what's happening is in the Europe is directly impact on South Korea and then North Korea and then this North Korean security region. And what about the new the Lee government in global strategy? Well, I don't think the President Lee articulate its own foreign policy at all. He's just too busy to deal with what's happened in the last year in a coup d'état and the self-coup and the impeachment process and his real election to be a president. At the same time, to deal with the Donald Trump and the United States, it's just daunting task and just overwhelming for him. But I think it's next year, the new government will approach it. But that's the what I just will explain next or 1 minute or so. It's going to be the background for the this policy. Well, security convergence actually puts South Korea in very difficult position. It's just very international security term. This is a strategic overstretch. South Korea's state capacity is growing and then very capable, but it's overstretched. It's entering the security theater in the Europe, and then probably when we discuss about India, South Korea defense cooperation, then probably subcontinent. We are providing weapons to Southeast Asian countries. That means we are entering the Southeast Asian theater too. And we are selling the very capable submarine to Canada. That's 12. That covers Arctic Ocean and then northern even goes beyond that in the northern Atlantic the ocean too. So South Korea's strategic and then especially defense. Of course economy technology can be very manageable, but military security wise we are actually entering every single corner of the world. That's very hard to things to do, and we were pushed to have a more strategic autonomy. I think it's we discussed about Deputy Director Son and I discussed about a little bit, but South Korea started to talk about strategic autonomy, and then I was very surprised. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Tokyo in the strategic dialogue on defense industry and the military strategy. The Japanese partners and colleagues and openly discuss strategic autonomy from the United States. That's unprecedented. Until last year, Japan didn't even mention about strategic autonomy. But those mainstream conservative experts and then advisors to the Diet and the cabinet, they mention again and again and again strategic autonomy. That means South Korea and Japan have a pretty similar position. And then what about bilateral strategic security relation with India? And then India has a strategic autonomy in their DNA of a diplomacy for such a long time. But is it really similar and then identical strategic autonomy from whom? Okay, we need to think about that. And India's global strategy, I've been following this BJP, Modi's BJP government's the foreign policy or global strategy, in a grander term. I think it's India understands these security convergences too, but I think it's India is just standing still and holding its own ground. I think it is because of Russia and India-Russia bilateral relationship. South Korea and then India has similarities and discrepancies to deal with each big country. For example, the United States and China and India and the European Union and others. But India has a different position on the Russia. So, but if we expanded the United States, China, Japan, Russia, Pakistan, and then NATO, and then India actually really wanted to go beyond South Asia in the military and the strategic term. And this is a big question because South Korea has no choice but to go there, go in that way. So again, India has been very strong in the military build-up and then strategic innovation. Of course, the Professor Pante mentioned that the process has been very slow. Then South Korea and India need to think of a bilateral strategic security relation, how we develop more. But my question to Indian colleagues, I think it's a question for last 10 years. And I started to engage with my Indian colleagues in 2015 or 2014. ORF, I visited a couple of times. But question, India's activist policy is still there. And we just talked about, I was a little bit surprised, the deputy minister mentioned about New Southern policy is still there. I think it's a very good sign. And then many people say the New Southern policy of South Korea has gone. Yeah, but I think he officially said that. So I very good sign. But my question, to India as always, is India is really emerging as another superpower. And then Professor Pant mentioned that middle power, and then South Korea and India. To be honest with you, South Korea is very flattered, to be categorized as like India, is the same level of the middle power. But I don't think it's the same level. India is much larger and a bigger country. Can has a potential to be a superpower, to compete with the United States and China. But is it really fulfilling destiny of being a superpower? And then my pronunciation is just Hindi, just so too bad. But Modi's vision for 2047, the new India is really there. And then is it really hatching or strategic autonomy from these two countries, or it's really pursuing its own destiny as a superpower to compete or cooperate with these two powers, the United States and China? So my question, I don't have exact answers, and we can discuss the nitty-gritties too. Defense sectors and then defense industrial sectors. Of course, I'm working with the Korean Navy on this issue too. But really, can we do some maritime cooperation, military, not just exercise it once or twice, but cooperating, do something, against whom? That type of question must be answered. But the thing is, let's start with this three questions. The two strategic perspectives on security convergence. I mentioned then dimensional security convergences. I think many will agree with that. But security, the regional security convergence, how India see this security convergence between Euro-Atlantic and then Indo-Pacific region. That's my first question, and for the discussion topics, and what South Korea and India and South Korea want from each other. I think it's economy and technology-wise, technology a little bit, but economic-wise, I think it's has a very high level of cooperation, and then it has even more potential, to be. And I just saw, the afternoon session and artificial intelligence. It's going to be a key, for these two countries, cooperation. Say this particular government say, sovereign AI and a foundational model must be done by South Korea and France and probably India, on and on and on. But what do they want from each other? And then let's make it very clear. In the military security dimension, economic security dimension, and technological security dimension, forging a shield, common shield against somebody, and then we must clarify, each other's state capacity, and then potential provisions of each other's resources to each other. But the last question is most important one. For what, and then with whom, and I didn't, put it. And against whom, can we fight together? The India's, the non-alignment and the multi-alignment, foreign policy credo, principle is still there. I respect that. But if we just improve this shielding, the security together, then we need to think about who are our friends and who are our enemies, and that's going to be identifying this thing is very, very important. But if we cannot say agree on who are our friends and who are our enemies for the clear term, that's going to be pretty hard to cooperate together. So military security dimension, economic security dimension, and then technology security dimension, we need to discuss. Is it China? And then what about Russia? For my concluding sentence, South Korea and Russia relationship has been deteriorating, and South Korean new government actually tried to approach Russia a little bit, but Russia actually has been rejecting the South Korea's approach. It is because Russia has been calculating, and then I think it's more like conclusion that North Korea is even more important and more useful than South Korea from the strategic value. South Korea's economic and industrial contribution to Russia is outweighed by North Korea's military and strategic contribution to Russia's overall converging security. So what about the India's approach to Russia? That's going to be pretty interesting and discussion topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Our first session, on defense industries, will be moderated by Professor In-Ju Son, the Deputy Director of the Institute for Future Strategy at SNU. Please help me welcome Professor In-Ju Son and the speakers back on stage.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Pan and Professor Park, for sharing very thoughtful and thought-provoking perspective on the Indo-Pacific security order and also the potential collaboration between two countries. And also, Professor Beck raised a lot of interesting questions. If you are really wanted to respond to it right away, I can give you a chance. Or I can open the floor, or I can collect some questions, and then we discuss it together. Shall I start?
Yeah, I'll just say that I think in a sense what was said was actually very similar to what I said, that if we don't know or if we are not on the same page with regard to what the security threat is, then the defense cooperation practically also hits a certain threshold, that it will not move beyond that. And I think some of the issues that were raised, I thought that if one is observing Indian foreign policy for at least for the last decade, it's not that difficult to identify who India's friends are and who India's enemies are. And I think therein lies a bit of confusion, right? So if you are saying that, look, how do we think of Russia? Now, if we think of Russia only through the lens of Ukraine, then there is a problem. Ukraine is, for India, Ukraine cannot be the be-all and end-all of India-Russia relationship, because there is a historical context to that relationship. Similarly, for you, China cannot be looked at only through the lens of India-China conflict. You have a larger relationship with China, a relationship with China that is historical in nature, but also driven by the economic logic of that argument, right? So our relationship with China has a different texture, given our challenges. And I don't think that that there has been an expectation in India that Korea would brandish or Korea would come in support of India every time there is an India-China crisis. And therefore that becomes a marker in how far India and Korea can go together. So while I agree with you fundamentally, I think the space that India will have to give to Korea and Korea will have to give to India in understanding that even as the two nations evolve their foreign policies or evolve their security policies, there is space for like-minded countries to work together. The question is, are we like-minded enough today than we have been in the past? And I don't, and therefore because I don't think there is enough intellectual heft that has gone into answering this question. Because generally, if you think about it, there has been a certain disillusionment with China in Korea, and there has been a certain disillusionment with America in Korea. There has been similar exercise in India. So if you are thinking of this as an inflection point, India and Korea together, or in India and Korea, like many other countries, are on the same page. We don't want US-China confrontation, but we can't do much about it. We don't want China to weaponize trade and supply chain resilience and overdependence, but we can't do much about it. We don't want America to use its strategic over-reliance that we have on them, that they weaponize, but we can't do much about it. Now the question therefore is there space then in this midst for countries like India and Korea to work together? Whether you call India a middle power or a great power or a superpower, that is beside the point. I think the question is whether we have capabilities that we can leverage in each other's interests. I think that's essentially the question we are asking. And I think that coming back to the point that you made and perhaps I also made, is that unless we have a framework through which we examine that relationship, which you said, who are we fighting against? I think unless we have a clarity on that, it becomes difficult to take it to the full potential.
Well, I've been following India's foreign policy in 10 years. 10 years is not enough, of course I know, but I totally understand why India has been reluctant to say support Ukraine and then other European NATO countries against Russia. Russia and India is totally different relations. We understand that, and then India has a different angle, of course, to deal with China via Russia and on and on and on. But the thing is, South Korea is entering the stage or theater to deal with the Europe's too. South Korea is now start to get a question from the NATO and then European NATO country, of course not the United States, Donald Trump in the United States probably not, is which side are you on? Europe or Russia? If we want to improve the relationship with Russia, we are not going to do more collaboration with South Korea. You are selling tons of weapons to Poland, and then Romania, and Estonia, and then Finland, and then the Great Britain, and even France is considering by South Korea's MLRS right now, and then jet fighters, on and on and on. But you are still wanting to have a good relationship with Russia. So this is South Korea is in the middle, but I don't think India has that type of problem. Europe, they are not asking the India to have a choose, select Russia or Europe. But South Korea in a very difficult position. So this is what I'm saying. So it's South Korea and India have a very like-minded countries, of course, into democracy, and then market system, on and on and on. Of course, we wanted to have the liberal international order, intact, but differences that actually make South Korea and India find common friends. We have many friends in common, but common enemy. To say go against. We don't need to have definitely have enemies, but I think that's the most important question. So one example is Russia, and then now probably we can discuss about North Korea, and then India has very strong and then special relationship with Iran, and then South Korea is selling a lot of weapons, Saudi Arabia and then Qatar and UAE, and then Iran is very uncomfortable with that. And this is not that simple when we discuss about this bilateral defense industrial and then defense military cooperation. Of course, we can patrol. We have South Korea might have acquired say nuclear engine submarine SSN in probably late 2030. Then we can go all the way down to subcontinent Indian Ocean if India wants. but that's a pretty long shot for the time being. So that's why I'm saying is we need to clarify who are the enemies and who are the theaters. We can cooperate and then do something together. This is strictly in a military term.
This tough question. We have plenty of time to discuss it in the late afternoon, and I just shift the gears from question from the more fundamental concept questions to more practical, concrete questions. I was very excited. You mentioned, Professor Pan mentioned that India is about to open the defense manufacturing sector. There's an opportunity for Korea, like-minded country. I want to push you further. Where do you see the most practical opportunity for joint R&D or co-production or technology exchange? Any you have a hunch or guess?
No, I see. I think the idea would, of course, be that India's policy is to focus on technology transfer and to build capacity at home. So I think the older framework of having a buyer-seller relationship is certainly being relegated in favor of a more in favor of relationships where either through joint ventures or through technology transfers, India wants to build its defense manufacturing base at home, along with other manufacturing. So there is a larger project that India is pushing forth, which is how to develop manufacturing in India, given the depletion of manufacturing, and defense manufacturing is part of that. So I think largely what we are going to see is India pushing its partners towards technology transfer and towards investing in India for defense manufacturing. And I think there, almost everything is on the table because it's a huge market, and India needs everything from small ammunition to big platforms. So in a sense, if there is one space where there is going to be a lot of traction and a lot of and again, this brings us to the Russia question. I think this is a lot of this has to do with Russia. The fact that after Ukraine, India realized that having such a degree of over-dependence on Russia is detrimental to our interests. This meant that not only do you diversify, but also you build your defense manufacturing base at home. And I think that is why this whole defense reforms in India have reached a critical point where the government realized that it can't be really pushed away. And one of the most interesting developments there in the policy space in India has been defense manufacturing. So I think, given the competencies that Korea has, both in high-end defense tech as well as in platforms that we are already doing, like Vajra howitzers, for example, it seems to me to be a logical place to start for Korean manufacturing, defense manufacturing to enter India. Now, and there again, there is also the defense manufacturing SMEs, small and medium enterprise. I mean, there is also a lot of that is visible, and given Korea's own capacities in this sector, I think that is also something that needs to be leveraged.
Okay, we are getting close to the end of this session, but I want to collect a few questions from the audience. We have some comments. Yes.
Yeah, just two quick questions. Harsh, when you said that there are other aspects in the Russia-India relationship that makes the Ukraine thing less central. But don't you think that other of your strategic partners are forcing India to see Ukraine as a central strategic issue through, of course, the question of the crude oil and the tariffs and things like that? So that's the first question. Second question is your astute use of the term middle power. I was wondering whether it's in fashion for Indian diplomats to label themselves as middle power, which clearly they are not. I mean, India is a great power now, and Indian authorities, they know that and they project that. But when trying to strike strategic alliances in the Indo-Pacific, the middle power idea becomes a very instrumental and strategic term to tie strategic partnerships. Yeah.
On the second question, if you, I mean, the diplomat here did not talk about middle power. So an academic was talking. I mean, the ambassador did not talk. But yes, I get the point that you are making. I think in some ways, I would say, when using the term middle power for me makes analytical sense, because in terms of size and certain kinds of critical indices, India may seem a bigger power, but there are so many other indices where India is still lagging behind. So on a whole, you would find that if you look at Indian capabilities and capacities into account in totality, you would find that going beyond middle power does injustice to the capabilities themselves. And I think it allows you, certainly, I mean, if you are thinking more broadly as middle power as an analytical category, then you have great powers and you have middle powers. If that's the categorization we are using, then I don't think at this point in time we have two major powers, great powers, if one can use them in sort of political science, higher literature. US and China seem to be two big dominant powers in comprehensive terms. And it also allows you to talk of, I think, the dynamic that we are seeing emerge, which is that the two big powers are clashing and competing and contesting. And that allows that space to flourish for certain other actors to have an independent voice and to push their own agenda. And I think if one is not careful, then I think analytically it creates all sorts of problems. So I think it's just, for me as an academic, it is a useful category. Though there is enough variation, enough heterogeneity within that concept itself to think of it differently. But I think on the first point, I think there two things have happened. One, if you go back to the Ukraine question when it emerged, when Russia had invaded Ukraine, and there was a sense that everyone has to support Ukraine, and the West was demanding that why is India not doing it? And I think from that point to today's relationship with the West, and the West also Europe and the US. So till the time there was Biden administration and Europe, Western Europe and Biden administration were largely on the same page when it came to Ukraine. And gradually both of them accepted the logic of Indian argument that India has a different relationship with Russia. You can't expect India to fall in line with and to take a perspective that West was taking on Ukraine. And I think there was a lot of leeway that was given to India. And I think India was able to convince the West of the legitimacy of its own argument as to why it has a different point of view on Russia, on Russia-Ukraine conflict. I think that argument still holds for Western Europe. But for Trump administration, which is the point that you are making, certainly now that they have upped the ante. And I think it has less to do, in my opinion, with the issue of Russia-Ukraine. It has to do with other issues which are tied up now in the India-Russia equation, which is the trade deal with India. So if you bring in the Russia equation, you also put pressure on India. You have another lever to use against India, right? So I think that is the way perhaps the thinking is going. And the irony of it all, that an administration that came to power in Washington saying that they want to engage Russia is putting sanctions on India for engaging with Russia is of course also there. But that's how the Trump administration functions. My own sense is that this won't be a big issue once the trade deal is signed. And I think we are already seeing Mr. Trump talking about how he wants to reduce the tariffs because India has stopped buying, although India has not stopped buying, but he's saying that India is reducing, which certainly it seems the data indicate that there is a reduction happening in terms of what India is buying from Russia at this point.
Okay. Any final remarks from Professor Pan?
Yes, okay.
Yeah, defense industrial cooperation. I think it's been the topic for last at least 10, 15 years. And when I started to get involved in strategic dialogue with India, always talk about defense industrial cooperation. And we had, I think, a successful case, of course, self-propelled Howitzer, which is stationed in the, the border with China right now, and some naval ships, of course, warships. But we had a fiasco of Gangnam Chosun shipbuilding industry. There was a really big blow. But I think it's now South Korea's defense industry is really expanding, and the India probably need another really viable partner beyond Russia, of which the weapons provision the capacity will be limited at least in the next 5 to 10 years. The United States is not going to give you the gas turbine engine for your jet fighter, 5th generation jet fighter. So I think we have a entirely new setup for South Korea and India to do something together. Ground weapon system, of course, infantry fighting vehicles. I think it's dire need in the the Indian Army, MLRS also. Most importantly, air defense system. Israel's Iron Dome is pretty good, but South Korea is providing a very good air defense system, which is not provided by the United States. A naval system, warships and submarines, and on and on and on. But again, we need to find some commonalities in very urgent term. Otherwise, it's going to be pretty hard for us, even though we have a very strong strategic dialogue in Seoul National University or ORF. It's going to be pretty tough for foreseeable future.
Okay, time's up. In our first session, my impressions were of the good start. So after lunch break, we'll resume in our discussion. And please join me, give me a big hand to great speakers. Thank you.